Another selection from Khalil, Jesus, the Son of Man, his words and his deeds, as told and recorded by those who knew him. Judas, the cousin of Jesus. Upon a night in the month of August, we were with the Master on a heath not far from the lake. The heath was called by the ancients the Meadow of Skulls, and Jesus was reclining on the grass and gazing at the stars. And of a sudden 2 men came rushing towards us breathless. They were as if in agony, and they fell prostrate at the feet of Jesus. And Jesus stood up and said, "Whence came you?" And one of the men answered, "From Machaerus." And Jesus looked upon him and was troubled, and he said, "What of John?" And the man said, "He was slain this day. He was beheaded in his prison cell." Then Jesus lifted up his head, and then he walked a little way from us. After a while he stood again in our midst, and he said, "The king could have slain the prophet ere this day. Verily, the king has tried the pleasure of his subjects. Kings of yore were not so slow in giving the head of a prophet to the headhunters. I grieve not for John, but rather for Herod, who let fall the sword. Poor king, like an animal caught, and led with a ring and a rope. Poor petty tetrarchs, lost in their own darkness, they stumble and fall down. And what would you of the stagnant sea, but dead fishes? I hate not kings, let them rule men, but only when they are wiser than men." And the Master looked at the 2 sorrowful faces, and then he looked at us, and he spoke again and said, "John was born wounded, and the blood of his wounds streamed forth with his words. He was freedom, not yet free from itself, and patient only with the straight and the just. In truth, he was a voice crying in the land of the deaf, and I loved him in his pain, in his aloneness. And I loved his pride, that would give its head to the sword ere it would yield it to the dust. Verily I say unto you, that John the son of Zachariah was the last of his race, and like his forefathers he was slain between the threshold of the temple and the altar." And again Jesus walked away from us. Then he returned and he said, "Forever it has been that those who rule for an hour would slay the rulers of years, and forever they would hold a trial and pronounce condemnation upon a man not yet born, and decree his death ere he commits the crime. The son of Zachariah shall live with me in my kingdom, and his day shall be long." Then he turned to the disciples of John and said, "Every deed has its morrow. I myself may be the morrow of this deed. Go back to my friend's friend, and tell them I shall be with them." And the 2 men walked away from us, and they seemed less heavy-hearted. Then Jesus laid himself down again upon the grass and outstretched his arms, and again he gazed at the stars. Now it was late, and I lay not far from him. and I would fain have rested, but there was a hand knocking upon the gate of my sleep, and I lay awake till Jesus in the dawn called me again to the road.